The playoffs are here, and you can predict the action all the way to the finals with FanDuel Predicts. Predict the spread, the total points, and even the game-winning moments that make the playoffs. Sign up and get a $25 bonus with FanDuel Predicts.
Offered by FanDuel Prediction Markets, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant. 18-plus bonus is non-withdrawable and expires 7 days after receipt. Trading derivatives involves significant risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Manage your activity with their consumer protection tools. Restrictions apply. See terms at FanDuel.com/predicts/bonus-offer-terms.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. My next guest, let's talk some economics. My next guest is Thomas Phillips, and truly one of the top economists in the country. He was with the chairman. He was chairman of the Economic Policy Council under Donald Trump in his first term, and is very influential with the Trump administration to this day. He also works with me at Unleash Prosperity. So, Thomas, thanks for joining.
Great to be with you, Steve.
So we got a lot to cover. You have a great study that I've co-authored, but you did most of the work on you've done two studies, and one of them we talked about the last time you were on the air, which was the cancer study about how much this would be if we could cure cancer, hundreds of trillions of dollars, literally, of benefit to mankind in just the United States by curing cancer. So we have to win that war. Now you have a new study that you've worked on that I think is fascinating, and that's the reason I wanted to have you on the air, which is if we could speed up the drug approval process in Washington at the Food and Drug Administration, we could save a lot of lives, but it would also be enormously beneficial to the American economy. Explain.
Yeah, so most people, when they hear that, get afraid because they think you're going to deal with unsafe products if the Food and Drug Administration doesn't get its will. But that's not what we're arguing. We're arguing safety goes actually pretty quickly to be determined by the FDA. What their second mandate from Congress is not only safety, it's effectiveness. What's the quality of the product? And very few government agencies are involved with trying to tell consumers that the government knows best what the quality of a product is, particularly because it gets determined by sort of an average statistic of the product as opposed to patients, which are very, very heterogeneous in if they want to take the risks of side effects or the benefit of treatment, etc. So it becomes this one-size-fits-all decision that takes an enormous time, sometimes a decade, for FDA to decide. And on top of it, many times after that, they let the private sector decide whether something is working or not for what's called off-label uses when you don't need FDA approval, essentially. So it's very, very strange in some way that FDA takes a decade to decide and then lets the private sector decide on other uses that the FDA doesn't need to clear, essentially. So, again, this is not about safety issues. This is about how well is a product working, essentially. So what we looked at was essentially if you shorten that time by anywhere from 1 to 6 years, there's about a 10 to 48 $1 trillion benefit from doing that, essentially, because health is so valuable to people that these products are extremely valuable to people, and holding them therefore off the market is enormous damage to patients in general. And I think there's a big role for FDA to cut. It doesn't have to get out of the safety business, but they should be getting out of this lengthy effectiveness business. They could do still the effectiveness, but they need to do it much quicker. That's our sort of takeaway from this.
Now, this is critically important. It is a very important study. And by the way, you can go to our website, unleashprosperity.com, and you can pull down the study. And you know, it's not just a matter of money. I mean, that study does show trillions of dollars of benefit to the American economy. But my gosh, Thomas, right now there are at least 5 or 6 very, very promising drugs that are just sitting on the shelf that will not be approved by the FDA, dealing with everything from MS to Parkinson's disease to diabetes to epilepsy. And, you know, I'm kind of a libertarian, as you know, so I think that people, if they, you know, my attitude about some of these drugs is my body, my choice. If people want to try these drugs, especially if you have a terrible disabling disease, why wouldn't you let people try these drugs? What would be the harm of that? And I think it's almost cruel not to let people suffering from these terrible diseases have a chance for a cure.
Yeah, I mean, the FDA is operating under a mandate from Congress, so it's not really FDA, it's Congress that needs to change.
So Congress is requiring these. Yes. It's ridiculous. It's outrageous. Yeah. So are we going to need Congress to change the law?
Yeah, 1962, there was an amendment to the Food and Drug Administration Act, which basically said we need not only safety, but we need effectiveness trials. That doesn't mean FDA is off the hook. FDA could do this much, much quicker than they are currently doing it. And it's a lot of bureaucracy, and there's a lot of lengthy delays within FDA that could just look at the way they handled the COVID vaccines. It took them 9 months, right?
Warp speed.
A decade. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, in that case, it's clear that this can go a lot more faster.
Yes.
And not only COVID patients value faster approval, so does the rest of the patient population suffering from every other disease.
Well, it's a really good analogy for the most part. The problem that, a lot of people have negative attitudes about that vaccine because the government required people to take the vaccine. What we're saying is, if you have a new drug, people should have the choice of whether they want to try this. And as long as you're telling people the risk of taking it, why not allow people, especially if they don't have any other options? Why not give people hope?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, there's no downside if you're dying. What's worse than that, essentially? And why can't you try potentially a beneficial treatment? And the private sector determines effectiveness all the time. Like I said, for off-label uses of in FDA. So. And that is very, very common in oncology, in cancer care, essentially, where there's life and death involved. So why can't we just do that immediately, in some sense, as opposed to waiting for the first cause or disease that being investigated by the FDA for a decade? Why don't we just have the private sector determine effectiveness like it does already for many, many, many diseases?
It's such an important study, and I hope people will go to Unleash Prosperity and look this up and call your Congress and say, come on, let's get these drugs. I'll just give you one quick example, Thomas. There's a promising drug that people can take in their 60s that can delay the onset of Alzheimer's. And guess what? I'm 67, and I have Alzheimer's gene in my family. So this is a drug I'd like to take, but the FDA won't let me do it.
I think it's crazy, to be honest. And I think it's not how the act was intended, essentially. I think it's grown into this monster bureaucracy that basically takes forever. And the issue is that they only care about unsafe, or ineffective drugs going on the market. That's what's called type 1 error.
Exactly.
Type 2 error concerns not approving safe and effective drugs in the first place.
Well, Thomas, it's a great study. Thank you so much for doing it. Thanks for carving out some time for the More Money Show. And folks, we will be right back.